Hello, and welcome to Entertainment Matters. I'm John Blackburn. This is a podcast for people who make live entertainment happen, where I talk to people both from within and outside the industry who have interesting, useful perspectives on how we think about our work and how we put it into practice. Some episodes are conversations, and in others, I take a few ideas from those conversations and explore how you might actually use them in your own shows and projects. Today's guest is Jillian George-Lewis, Director of Creative Programming at the Hippodrome Casino in London. In this episode, Jillian talks about reimagining one of London's iconic venues and what it really took to bring Magic Mike Live to the stage, as well as how bold ideas, communication, and care can change everything in live entertainment. Please enjoy this conversation with the one and only Jillian George-Lewis. Jillian, would you tell us who are you and what do you do?
I am Jillian. I am the Director of Creative Programming at the Hippodrome in London. I'm also a performer, so I do some magic, some singing, and a lot of hosting. That's basically fills up most of my life.
Amazing. And just tell us, what was a live event that you attended as an audience member that really stands out in your mind? What's something that you really loved as an audience member?
I've got a couple of things. I'm going to pick three genres, so we're covered. Obviously, I'm from a theatre background. I trained as an actor, so I think one of the best things I've seen, two things I've seen, is at the Bridge Theatre, which is newish. I think it opened just pre-pandemic. I saw Midsummer Night's Dream and Guys and Dolls there, and they were both phenomenal. And I really love that exciting, immersive use of space. But I also saw something that I need to mention. It's not necessarily live. What I saw wasn't live. They do live events. I went to the Sphere in Las Vegas, which blew my mind. I honestly have not been the same since I came back from that. And I watched that Darren Aronofsky documentary about the world and how we're damaging everything and it's all terrible. But I have never experienced technology like that. It really was almost overwhelming to the point I came back and I felt like my mind had been altered. So those are two things. And also, I went to see the Pet Shop Boys at the O2 and it was just the most joyful thing I've ever been to in a long time.
That's amazing. Jillian, that's so cool. Thank you for bringing those up. And my partner, Jess, actually has been showing me loads of things from that Vegas Sphere.
God. Yeah.
And everything that she's shown me, even if it wasn't an act that I maybe would have gravitated to, every single thing she's shown me, I've been like, wow. So, yeah. So tell me, when you went to the Sphere, let's go with that one for a second. I mean, obviously there's just the spectacle of it, is it? But what is it that you said it blew your mind? You said it changed you. So what is it about it that made the impact?
I think I haven't seen anything live there. I went I think the week after it opened. So there were still lots of tech issues, which made me laugh a bit because even something that deals with the same problems we deal with every day. I was like, someone plugged the kettle in, somebody unplugged it. But I think there's two things to it. When you land in Vegas, it's huge. Like you can see it, and the advertising that it does on the outside of the Sphere is amazing, and it changes. It has like little emoji faces. It's got pumpkins now and things for Halloween. And it was just going into it, the experience. It's almost like a 360 visceral thing that happens because they have sense, like you're sort of flying through the world looking at different things, and there was like a field full of oranges, and then I was like, I can smell oranges. Am I imagining that? Is it real? But I think they do actually create like little bits. But it's
Smell-o-vision.
Yes, smell-o-vision. It was so subtle that you're actually starting to question whether you've been just suggested that, and then you can smell oranges, or there's orange scent in the air, and then there was wind, and things slightly move. It's kind of like one of those simulator things that it was just really, really clever and really phenomenal. And then there was a thunderstorm at one point, and I actually felt a little bit scared. I was like, it's so real.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you. I'm sure we're going to talk more about those kinds of experience pieces of the puzzle. You also mentioned the Pet Shop Boys and the joy of it. So why was that Pet Shop Boys gig so joyful?
I think it was kind of the opposite of what I've just talked about. It was just very stripped back and simple. It was just the two of them. They must be nearly 60 now, I suppose, maybe even older or in their 60s. And it was just like all the hits from like through my childhood, and I've always loved them. My dad loves them, and I kind of got into them when I was probably just a kid. And just the diversity of people there was just like a really lovely environment, and everyone was just dancing along. It wasn't a heavy tech show. I mean, they had all the screens and things, but it's kind of standard now, I suppose. But it was just the two of them with a keyboard singing, and it was just beautiful.
Mm. Isn't that so interesting? And then, of course, the other one that you mentioned was the immersive theatre
Yeah,
musical that you've been to.
the bridge.
The Bridge, yeah. That's so interesting, though, isn't it? That those two very different things can have a big impact, right?
Yeah.
And what do you think do you think there's anything maybe at the core of for the moment to take the Pet Shop Boys compared to the Sphere, and I know it wasn't the same kind of event or anything, but what do you think is maybe at the core of those two things? What do you think that they do have in common, maybe that leads to the big feelings, you know?
I think it's finding the right sort of environment for what it is you're trying to make your audience feel. And I think we have leaned massively into technology now, as you know, we should in 2025. But sometimes watching something that isn't heavily tech um, is just, it's no less impressive. And it's just a different way of experiencing live entertainment. It's all about that person. It's all about the connection between the performer and the audience. And whether you use a load of tech to communicate that or you just do it more organically, I think it just proves that, you know, there's not one right or wrong. Everything has its place and everything has its position. And sometimes stripping stuff back is as impressive as something that's been millions of dollars to put together.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Jillian. And maybe stepping in a slightly different direction now. So you're now, and correct me if I get this wrong, it's the head of creative programming. Is that right?
Director, I'll have you know.
Director
Watch yourself.
thank you. I'm. I'll fix it in the edit. Director of creative programming for the Hippodrome, and you're a performer yourself. So tell us a bit of the story. Like what has led you to your role as director of creative programming at the
Yeah.
Hippodrome?
Well, I trained as an actor 250 years ago, and I started out doing that just late 90s, I suppose, when I came out of drama school. And I was reasonably successful. I was getting a bit of work and all of that. And then I was getting a bit bored with doing Shakespeare, which I did a lot of. And I think it was in Midsummer Night's Dream about 7 times. And I thought, do you know what? I've played every female character and half of the male ones now. I think I've probably done this. And then this audition came up for a burlesque show. Now, I didn't even know what the word burlesque meant, but I was interested. I was interested in the word. So I went to it and something just clicked. I was like, this is a genre's been created for me and I'm going to have to do this. At the same time, I got offered something fairly big that was going to Edinburgh and going to tour. And I was like, no, I think I'm going to have to take this show with absolutely no guarantee of anything. So I did that and haven't really looked back. And I just felt, I think for me as a performer, it was just a way of sort of defining who I was and not being typecast and not being put into roles that the way people saw me. And as an actor, I sort of got to define how it is to be a female performer, and a lot of things that there were a lot of questions about burlesque at the time, about whether it was stripping, whether it was adult entertainment. And actually, there's so many lovely, incredible things and conversations that have come out of that. So I ended up doing that. I ended up taking over the show that was being created and ended up producing it. And out of that, there was a venue in Holborn called Volupty, which was the first ever burlesque supper club, which I ended up programming there after having run my show there for probably a couple of years actually. So I ended up there programming, and that's sort of how the programming life started. That eventually closed down, not due to bad programming, but other reasons. And then I went in as an assistant to the Hippodrome, and it was chaos. There was like shows in the diary in 2 weeks' time that weren't on sale. It was all just, there was no real direction of what people wanted to happen, or what the kind of brand of it all was going to be, or whether it was for casino customers, or whether we were going to look outside. So eventually, when I took over that department, I think I made some pretty bold decisions about how that theatre should work and run, which led us to Magic Mike Live in 2018.
Which we will absolutely get to. I can't wait to hear more about that story, which I've heard bits of over the years from you, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I would say, as someone who was who had the chance to sort of perform as part of the Hippodrome, both which I'm very grateful for, once you had taken over, but even prior to that, and that, yeah, there was a noticeable difference in the environment and how it ran, and all of that, and I remember actually. I remember actually being in the band for something, and we'd come in and we'd done the sound check, and we were all ready to go, and I think we were having some food, and I just remember I think it was the bass player and you'd come and sort of had said hello and introduced yourself, and it was all suddenly very organized and clear what was going on, which it hadn't always been in the past, necessarily, maybe just on the days we were there, but I remember, I think it was the bass player, a friend of mine, we turned to each other and just went, well, this is different.
There's some structure, guy.
Something's changed here, hasn't it? So before we get on to maybe the up to date and the Hippodrome and Magic Mike and stuff, you used a very interesting choice of words, I think, when you were talking about working at the Volupte, at the supper club. You said you ended up doing the programming there, having had your own show in there. So.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about this. Tell me, was that your first experience of creating a show for a particular space, which is something you mentioned at the start of this conversation?
Mm-hmm.
And then how did you end up, and for people that are just listening to the audio, I've just done the massive air quotation marks. How did you just end up programming for that venue?
Well, I had taken over the show, which was called the Kitten Club. It was a very sort of British style burlesque, and by that I mean very comedy driven, kind of political, but very funny and very subversive and silly, really. So there was a group of 5 girls, and the host was male magician compere. We called him Tomcat. Christian Lee, who's a great magician and good pal. So we were running that. It started out under some arches at London Bridge, which were very atmospheric but also very damp. And then we'd done little corporate bits and pieces, but this Volupte felt like the right space for us, and it ran there for years. And I think that experience just made me think about, like, our show was selling very well, and I didn't feel like I was doing an awful lot to sell those tickets. I think I just got a sense for what the right show in the right venue means. And I think that is the key to getting programming right and really choosing something that suits the venue. And I started to really think about that. And they didn't ever really have a proper entertainment experience programmer. It would sort of be the owners or one of the staff there would sort of just schedule things in, more sort of coordinating than anything else. But I felt like it needed a bit of strategy. And that's when the sort of opportunity came up. That's when I went for it. And I didn't really know what I was doing. It was sort of based off a sense of, I think I could get this right, but it was quite small scale and I wasn't like putting the business at risk. But it was, yeah, I think, again, similar to what I did at the Hippodrome, it's just I think you have to have a strategy. It doesn't matter if it's all right. You can adjust that as you go along, but without a plan, there's just chaos and nobody knows what's going on. Even if it's as simple as on Wednesday nights we do this, on Sunday nights we do this, you've got something to work towards, and then you can adjust and work out where you need support, where you need marketing, or if in fact you've just got that wrong and this is the audience that we're going to find on that particular night. So I really started to enjoy the sort of science of that. And I had really enjoyed working there and getting that right. And it was a really nice little springboard and a small space to go then into the Hippodrome, which is a much bigger space with much more potential, and sort of hit the ground in there. And I was quite anxious about going into the Hippodrome because I didn't really have a sense of what it should be when I went in, which was quite exciting. But we got there in the end. But it took a while to sort of shift that juggernaut of a venue round and work out what was going to sell. And also with a casino, like a lot of people in the UK have sort of odd perceptions about casinos that they wouldn't necessarily have if they went out to Vegas. Everyone goes to casino there. You stay in the casino, the hotel's there. But in the UK, I feel like casinos still sometimes have a little bit of a seedy sort of reputation. People aren't quite sure if they should be in there or not, if it's a bit naughty or a bit dirty. But the Hippodrome, once you step in there, is obviously super glam and very Vegas in style. So I think changing people's perceptions about that as well has been something that is really important to that programming world.
Thank you, Jillian. And you said there when you talked about arriving at the Hippodrome, you said that you didn't have a strong sense of what it was supposed to be. Now, at some point in that journey, you figured it out. So what was the process? What was it exactly? What were the thoughts you had to have to move from however you came into the Hippodrome to then turning it into then devising the strategy of that we do this on Monday, we do this on Wednesday, we do what had to happen?
Well, I think a couple of things happened. One, with no disrespect to any colleagues past or present, most of the senior team in there were older men. And I was probably one of the very few women, younger-ish women at the time. And I felt like, even though we had some really good acts, that it was a little bit stuck in the past of what the expectations of casino were, whether it was an Elvis night or a Rat Pack night. Now, those acts were brilliant and they weren't selling terribly, but I just thought this is not sustainable and it's not bringing any fresh blood into this business. The people who are already customers quite enjoy it, but they might enjoy something else as well. So first of all, I did exactly what we just talked about. I started to put a weekly plan together. I kept those shows, so they would go on the Friday, Saturdays. There'd be Elvis, there'd be Rat Pack, and those had their place. But I started to bring in sort of more things that we weren't expecting, but things that I knew would sell tickets to their own crowd, and that would bring the fresh blood in. So we had some comedy stuff. My friend Adam Kay, who you might know, wrote the This Is Going to Hurt. He is a good friend. So he at the time helped me run this comedy night. So we had all these comedians come in who were quite well known on TV. But even then, that was a bit of a struggle to sell a ticket because people didn't equate the Hippodrome with comedy. And comedy is quite a tough sell. And then an opportunity came up with this big Australian circus company, the kind of the rock stars of circus, called Strut and Fret. And they'd been running shows previously down at the Underbelly on the South Bank over the summer, but that wasn't happening on this particular year. I can't remember. I think the tent had been moved or something. So they wanted to run their summer season with us. And I remember going into the boardroom and saying, look, I think we have to do this. It's the first time we'll have done a run of a show. I think it was going to be maybe 6-8 weeks. It will not make us money. It will probably lose us money. But if it goes well, it'll change the whole profile of the theatre.
Wow.
People who've never heard of us before will suddenly have heard of us. We'll get press, be lots of marketing, we'll be on tube posters, all of that. So they put their faith in it and went ahead with it, which was incredible. It sold fairly well, but it didn't make money. Maybe broke even, but that was a bonus. But during that run, the producers from Base Entertainment, who are a Vegas-based company, American company, came over to look at this particular show, which was called Blanc de Blanc, because they wanted to take it to a casino in Vegas. But while they were there, they also produced Magic Mike Live. They were like, oh, this is a nice space. Maybe this place will work for Magic Mike London. So a couple of weeks later, I got a call saying, would we be interested in that? I was like, oh, let me think. Sure. So within a few weeks, I went out to see the show. So that's how that happened.
That is amazing. And I'm just going to keep the tease of the Magic Mike story in the air for a little bit longer. I'm learning, Jillian. And so, okay, thank you for that. That is a pretty big idea to have had to the summer season with the circus company. And because, especially with you saying, you'd done it at you programmed at Volupte, having sort of taken over after your show, and now you're at the Hippodrome and you're figuring out how to make it great. And that's a pretty that's a pretty bold idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
To,
I mean, I
you
didn't
know,
sleep, sure. I think if you're not gonna have bold ideas, then there's no point, especially with a place like that. I think you either go hard or get out, because kind of insipid or vanilla programming isn't gonna change the game there, I don't think. You have to kind of make those big choices. It was somewhere that I think the owners were at the point where, if we can't make this theatre work, we'll just convert it into gaming. So they didn't want to do that, but also they didn't want to just have a program that wasn't really making any money. That wasn't the main criteria. Just wasn't really doing anything for the rest of the business. I think they wanted something that was going to be a bit more profile changing and maybe even a bit of a shock to people.
yeah, they came to the right place, didn't they, Jillian?
Sure,
They
here I am.
absolutely came to the right person. As cost of living, all of the other things in the economy and the other things that are going on in the world around us continue, I think it would have been very easy for the Hippodrome, surely, to have just carried on with programming that kind of worked. Things that, like you said, that the current clients and guests were pretty happy with. It would surely be, especially in a company, a venue like that, it would surely have been very easy for them just to kind of keep it going. And so, yeah, we have entertainment. Yeah, the food's great, but obviously you're coming for the gaming. But for you to be able to come in and put that idea across in such a way that they went for it, because again, somebody else might have come in with a very similar idea and not put it across in a way that made them get excited about it. And I'm wondering if you think that perhaps we might just need a bit more of that attitude in live entertainment in general in the UK, because as theatres are struggling to sell tickets and all the rest of it, as I look at them, it's like, yeah, well, I don't really know what this theatre is for.
Right?
Right.
I think the most important thing, and my boss, the CEO of the business, Matthew King, talks about brand a lot. And without you knowing what your brand is, you might as well not bother. You've got to get that right. And that has to be first and center of everything. And the most important brand question is, how do you want your customers to feel? And I think if you follow that, then you're onto the right path. And it's not an easy question, and the answer to it will change all the time. But I think you just have to keep putting your customer at the center. How do you see your customer? What do you want them to feel? How do you want them to, as soon as they buy their ticket to something or book their dinner reservation, all of that as part of that customer experience and journey is so important. And I think that has to be bold, and you have to be different, and you have to keep thinking about how it evolves and how it changes and how you remain interesting and how you remain at the top of your game. Otherwise, you're just selling the same old shit, really. And there's a lot of safe programming, I think, in the West End. We keep seeing, the same musicals again and again, maybe a little reworking of. But I think theatre's there, it's meant to reflect society and meant to reflect life and meant to be challenging and be political. And I'm not saying Magic Mike necessarily is challenging or political, but as a venue, I think you have to keep doing things that are exciting and interesting to your customer.
Amazing. And I wonder what your reaction to this might be. I think that there are political and challenging elements to Magic Mike, even though it's fun, right? Because first of all, it's a show for women, predominantly, right?
Predominantly.
Would that be a fair
Oh,
thing to say?
absolutely. The show is designed for women.
Right. Well, there's not a lot of that happening in the West End, is there necessarily?
No, and there certainly wasn't a lot of women coming into the Hippodrome either. So
right.
It was a big change of demographic for us. And I think that's where some of the bigger bosses were a little bit like, oh, what does this mean? Is it going to affect the rest of the business? Is it going to affect gaming? Are these women going to come in drunk every Saturday in their hundreds and mess the place up? Now, well, that's not entirely untrue. It hasn't affected the rest of the business negatively in any way.
That's great. Yeah. So so I think that we can give you and Magic Mike credit for probably some bigger things, I think that's great. Thank you. As a setup into the Magic Mike story,
Yes.
you mentioned the importance and the sort of centrality of brand there,
Mm.
and the first question that you fired out as part of that was yeah, that how do you want the customer to feel? So okay, would you? And this can be hypothetical. It can be an example, but what was the shift in the answer to that question from maybe pre you coming up with the strategy and then moving into, let's call it the Magic Mike era? So what was the answer to the how the customer feels question maybe before when you were just figuring stuff out? And what is the answer? What was the answer post Magic Mike?
I don't think, in all honesty, I was asking myself that question at that point. I think this is maybe after the event, now that I look back on it and now that I'm on the brand team now, I think about those decisions and whether or not, there was something in my head that was like, oh, I knew I had to change the profile and I knew I had to have new customers. And I knew that that would help the Hippodrome and it would help the evolvement of what a casino is and all those sort of bigger questions. I think with Magic Mike, the collaboration element of it was right. And they are a very, very strong brand. Whether you've seen the show or not, there's loads of elements of surprise and shock in the show that when I went to see it, I was like, the first 10 minutes, I thought, I am not having this show in my venue over my rotting corpse. This is the worst thing I've ever seen. Then there's this massive twist. And I was like, oh, that's so clever. I must have it. Get it in immediately. So there's hugely feminist elements to the show that I think even the audience coming are sort of expecting like a strip show or a male review kind of thing. And it's not that at all. It's all about respect and consent both ways and how we treat each other, and particularly in heterosexual relationships. So that's a bit of an education. And I think for our customer coming in, I know I haven't really answered your question, but I'm on a roll now.
Go.
I think for women coming into the casino, that was really important for me as a woman to have a safe space that you feel like maybe in the afternoon you'd just want to come in and have a coffee or a wine by yourself. I really like when women can go into a space on their own and feel safe. And I think the Hippodrome has always had that, but not en masse. So I think having a very female-friendly space was important to me as a woman. And that show and audience were obviously a real sort of good test of that, and getting it right, making sure that those people felt safe, that obviously the show was right for them, and the treatment of them before at the door when they come in. Where do they go for a drink before? How do we treat them? How do we make sure they get to their seats? If someone's too drunk, how do we look after them? All those things I think are just really inherent to the brand and inherent to that nice profile shift, I would say.
How many other major venues let's just say in London, do you think have had those conversations and those thoughts?
That's tricky because I've only really worked for one. I think there's some of the bigger theatre groups that are quite intelligent about their programming. There's one in particular who I know really think about that sort of profile thing, but I think I've got a whole venue rant about to come out, like thinking about smaller scale cabaret and music venues and things like that. And we both know that a lot of them have shut down post-pandemic, and that it's getting harder and harder to put like kind of smaller mid-range night shows, music events, cabarets, whatever on. And a lot of the time, I know it's a cost thing, but unless you've got someone that's really thinking about your programming, it is just coordination. You could be putting any old shit on and you don't really know if it's going to sell or not. And while I'm not saying that I always know, I think someone who's experienced in the entertainment industry is really important to a smaller venue to try and at least strategize that and have something to work from rather than just scattergun approach to how we program. But because of the cost of living that you mentioned earlier, I feel like I've got friends who are running smaller productions, really good productions, really selling well. But the deals on offer from some of those smaller venues now are just dreadful, like minimum bar spends, fine, but almost unachievable. And then on top of that, they want a higher fee. And then maybe a box office split. I'm like, what? How are we meant to make this work? Who's thought this through? Because that person put in all the effort in to bring clients or people, customers, guests into your venue aren't going to make any money. It's got to work both ways. So no, I don't think the short answer is I don't think a lot of venues are thinking that strategically about it. And it would be great if they did, but I know that there's a cost attached to that they maybe can't swallow at this point.
When you said that at the end there, especially about the cost attached to having someone maybe come in and have some more strategic thoughts. A few people I've spoken to recently have talked about the fact that everybody is anti-risk. We're all
Yeah,
very risk averse. That's a word that gets thrown around in meetings a lot, isn't
definitely.
it? But, and I've said this before, but of course, the biggest risk is not doing anything new about it, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like that's much riskier.
of course. I think I must say that I was in a position of privilege being in a casino because, it's a venue that has money and has budget for that sort of thing. And previously, I'd never worked in a place that had, proper budgets for things. There was never an argument about costs, which was just eye-opening for me because everything I'd done before, being on a shoestring and saving money here and saving money here and making sure that covered that. So that was a huge privilege to have that. But at the same time, if it hadn't worked, we wouldn't have been able to keep it going. So I think I did have that, but even there's ways of taking risks without putting your whole business at financial risk, I think. And it's just about opening your mind to what might be exciting and interesting and not being scared of like I don't know, getting something wrong or changing your brand or being a bit more challenging or exciting. I think it's very easy just to stick to what you know.
And just to bring us back slightly to that brand question again. So the first question that you mentioned to kind of figure out the brand thing was, how do you want your customer to feel when they buy the ticket or when they show up during the journey?
No.
What might other useful questions be for people, do you think, to figure out that brand thing?
Well, there's lots of brand exercises you can do. There's all of these sort of archetypes you can look at and how you see your business, whether it's a joker or an innovator. I can't remember the source of it. I can send you after if I look it up. But there's lots of questions you have to ask yourself as a business. How you want to operate, and I think you can do that in broader terms. I mean, obviously, the Hippodrome operates several different businesses under the one umbrella of Hippodrome. So there's the gaming, there's the hospitality, and even under that, there's different restaurants, there's different bars, and all of them are slightly different. All of them have their own sort of sub-brand, but then there's an overall brand of the Hippodrome. And I think it's important to collaborate with like-minded people, even if your brand visions are slightly different. The customer has to be the most important thing. And bringing someone into something that they might feel a bit challenging, but then they have an amazing time, they get treated really well. The toilets are clean, they're looked after, they know where they're going, everyone says hello to them. I think that personal sort of bespoke service thing, customer service thing, is really what takes it up to the next level and makes people remember an experience. And I think a lot of people now, like, there is a cost of living crisis. We see that across the West End. I think that people are spending less money. They're much more cautious about when they will spend it, and they'll still go out and have a big night. But I think we have a responsibility to make sure that is outstanding. And if we don't, then I think we're doing a bit of a disservice.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Gillian. I feel like I've teased people long enough.
The time has come.
I think the time has come. So thank you. So with all of that brilliant sort of setup about some of the ways that you think and some of the background to it, tell us, what did it take to make the Magic Mike thing at the Hippodrome happen? And I've heard bits of this from you over the years, like, between cups of tea or whatever, or walking on and off stage. But yeah, go on, give us the story. And you mentioned that that this was it Base Entertainment?
Base, yeah. So
So
that's where the
Base
story
Entertainment. Yeah.
starts. They'd come to see the Strut and Fret show, Blanc to Blanc, with the idea of bringing it somewhere to a venue in Vegas. And while they were there, they were obviously, Magic Mike had opened in Vegas, doing very well, and they were thinking about the next international show, which was going to be London. So they saw the Hippodrome. Now, the Hippodrome was too small for the show, and it probably still is, but here we are, 7 years on. So they contacted me, they asked me to go out, but they had so much investment in Magic Mike moving to another city that they literally could have started from nowhere and built something to accommodate it, as long as there was a sort of structure in place. So they looked at 25 venues. I didn't really know this when I went out. I was like, yes, let's get this. Went out, saw the show after the first 10 minutes, loved the show. And then the conversation started between the broader team at the Hippodrome and Base, who were then running Magic Mike. So they came over, they looked at the space, they had a lot of investment. It was going to be like a complete rip out of what was in the theatre to add a bit of capacity. They really wanted 420 seats, 415 maybe. And we got to 326 in the end. So I knew then that we really had to step this up, because there wasn't quite enough space, but that would mean we'd have to do 10 shows a week and not 8. So that's how that worked. So they came over, and then one Sunday morning I had to go and meet Channing.
Sorry, hang on. I'm just going to pick up on this. Had to. You had to go and meet Channing.
The theatre. So it was 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I think I did quite a late night as well. So we're at the little back entrance, at the back entrance of the Hippodrome. And I wasn't a massive Channing Tatum fan at all. So I was like, oh my God, what if I don't recognize this guy? So I'm out there with security, and then this beast of a man comes around the corner. I mean, he must be like 6'4" at least. He's enormous. And he was like, hi, Jillian. I was like, oh my God, it's Channing Tatum. So he came in, and he was just like so cool, like just the nicest, most down to earth guy. He was like, oh, is it too early for a beer? I was like, absolutely not, Channing. It's great. We showed him the space. We had a good chat, and just really friendly, really convivial. Had a drink with him. He liked it. There was quite a few different elements to the production. So Warner Brothers, Channing also had a production company. So all of them sort of came into place. And then the Hippodrome, eventually, when we realized that there was a chance we might not get it, they really came on board as co-producers and invested a little bit of money into the show. And that sort of sealed the deal. And then we started the refurb, which was probably the most terrifying few months of anyone's life. So we closed the theatre as it was in June, and the show opened for previews at the very end of October, and the launch was in November. So actually, no, November. It opened for previews in November, and it launched at the end of November. So it was pretty tight. On the night before we opened, it was carnage. Like, Channing was running around picking up wires. I was like, I'll never see this in my career ever again. This is insane. But it opened on time. The on sale was insane. They launched it on Britain's Got Talent, you might remember.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a Britain's Got Talent final, which was in June. It was probably, June sometime, 2018. And they have like pop-up performances during the final. So these guys came on stage. Actually, Channing did this VT saying, oh, look, I'm really sorry I can't be there tonight, but enjoy Magic Mike Las Vegas. So all these guys came on stage and did a routine from the show. Loads of aerial, loads of tech. It was great. But then at the very end of the routine, Channing walked through the crowd onto the stage and was like, this isn't the Vegas show, this is the London show, and we're opening the Hippodrome Casino. Tickets are on sale now, off you go. And everyone lost their minds. And I remember asking the marketing company the week before, I was like, what's realistic? What would look like a success in the first sort of week of on sale? And they were like, look, if you do £1 million worth of tickets in a week, you've smashed it. And I was like, oh, as if within an hour there's £1 million worth of tickets sold.
Whoa!
Ticketmaster's gone over, and we're all there at the Hippodrome just like losing our minds. And then, the rest just kind of unfolded as it is. I don't think I will ever have another opportunity like that. It was just insane, given what the Hippodrome had come from to this. Was just like, you could not have bought that press for love or money. It was madness.
Oh, that's incredible, Jillian. It
was mad. And we're about to celebrate our 7th birthday in a few weeks. So
wow.
Yeah. still selling out a lot of the night. So we're doing all right under the current climate, certainly.
It's great. Well, and also there'll be a lot of different reasons why it's 7 years strong, won't there?
Yeah.
A
I
bunch of
mean,
the stuff that you talked about earlier.
definitely. And I think with that sort of show, there's always an audience. There's always a hen party. There's always a birthday party. There's always a group of girls going out to celebrate something, whatever that is. I think it has an appeal across a good demographic of age. And I think the Hippodrome is the right partner for it. So all those little things that before you get into the theatre, I think we've really worked to make as great as we can, like the little pre-show cocktail bar with live music. We've got a secret bar. We've got a nice dinner in the steakhouse. We've got a rooftop. So there's just so many sort of opportunities to make the customer have a nice time pre and post show as well as enjoying the actual performance.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got so many questions about that, but do you think that that bit might be a just a part, at least a part of the success, which is that because it's at the Hippodrome, you can go to Magic Mike, and that is you can have your whole night out being looked after by the Hippodrome. Whereas if you go to another venue, you've got to book somewhere else for dinner.
Yeah.
And then you've got to think, oh, am I going to get, and then I've got to go to the thing. And then you've got to go somewhere else for a drink afterwards. Or maybe you have it at the theatre bar, but it's like,
Ugh.
maybe it's not the same experience,
Warm
is it?
gin and tonic.
A warm, yes, a warm gin and tonic served to you by a surly youth experience child. No, but it's a very different experience, isn't it?
I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think
Yeah,
so?
I
I'm
think-
wondering because it's a very complete. The show is incredible, but it's not just the show. Like the night is curated, isn't it?
It is, but it's still, there's a bit of a challenge sometimes because people are so conditioned into, I'm going to a show, therefore I will book this, and this before. So it takes us quite a lot of effort to explain to them that if you just come here, we've got everything you need under one roof. And it makes your evening so much simpler. You don't have to think because the steakhouse will know that you've got tickets for 7 o'clock. So they'll make sure your bill's done, that you're escorted there, that you know that you have to nip to the loo before. So we're really, I think, across all the departments, really good at taking the pressure off the party and not having them worry about time and go, we've got to get to a show, can you bring the bill? We know all that already. So convincing people that they should spend their whole night with us is the only challenge we have, which, is a nice challenge to have. But making sure they don't go, I was about to name a pub there. Probably shouldn't do that. Don't go across the road to that terrible pub with the dirty glasses or who've run out of glasses. And have a terrible Prosecco there when you could come and listen to some lovely live piano in our permission lounge or have a bespoke cocktail in the secret bar. And those people there know you're going to the show and will make sure you get there in good time.
When you mentioned the Pet Shop Boys gig and you mentioned the Sphere as your sort of two of your, and the immersive theatre piece that you showed, you were talking about elements of the experience. You didn't really talk that much about the content of the show. Like you didn't say, oh, this was my favorite song, you know? And I wonder whether as we move forward with live entertainment in the UK, taking care of that aspect of the larger experience beyond just what the content of the show is, how big a role do you think that plays in the success of Magic Mike?
I think it's huge. And I think it's particularly huge for that particular audience, that type of audience, where you have a lot of groups, you have a lot of women. I'm not saying that it's not as relevant for two people going to see a theatre show. It's still great to get that right. But there's so many things that could go wrong when you have groups of women who might have been out pre-gaming. They might have been to a brunch on a Saturday morning and then they've come to Magic Mike. Getting that customer service right is essential to the running of the production side of things. And, not ruining someone's hen party because they've got too drunk to get in or they've forgotten their ID. They've got, we try and accommodate every single thing and just look at, I remember going out to Vegas before we had the show and we asked that front of house team and that venue team, every single problem. So they've listed like oceans and oceans. We were like, oh yeah, note that down. And then we made all the same mistakes anyway, but had to deal with them. But it's just like, until you've done it yourself, you're just like, right, so these are the specific issues to our venue and our space. But after 7 years, I mean, I'm not saying that we don't run into problems now and again, we do, but it's a pretty well-oiled machine in terms of experience, I think. But I think other venues are sort of catching up with that and realizing how important it is. But we have, again, the privilege of the size of the place. Like, there's so many different bars, there's so many different things you can do, but we still have that casino thing that people are like, oh, I'll go in to see the show, but I don't know if I'd want to go to their restaurant, or I don't know if I'd want to go to one of their bars. And having Magic Mike as a collaborator does sort of gloss over that a bit and makes it a little bit more appealing. Whereas if it was just Hippodrome Casino and Magic Mike, they might not get that. So Magic Mike have sort of co-created 2 of the spaces with us. So having that really luxurious, beautiful kind of environment that feels like it's been handmade just for you, and everything's just that little step up, I think is nice. But yeah, sometimes when you go to theatre, you don't really have much of a choice. There's just one bar, or there's a little place to get food. But yeah, there's no reason you can't collaborate with someone, a neighbour nearby, and start thinking about things in that way.
Yeah, fab. That's so good, Jillian. Thank you. And as you sort of reflect on that process of collaborating with Magic Mike, bringing them in, the refo. I mean, these things are all huge things that, one of them would be enough of a career defining thing to shout about. But as you think about the totality of all of that, what were maybe some of the difficult moments? What were some of the challenges of putting it all together, and how did you figure it out?
It was really a team effort. I mean, I was in the middle of it all with everyone, but the biggest challenge was that venue's open 24/7, so there's no downtime. So we had to do everything while the casino was operating, while the restaurant was operating. So we couldn't just shut and build something. It had to happen while the venue was running. So even sorry.
No. Sorry. And just for context, because I've just realized that probably most of the people listening or watching this haven't had the opportunity to come to the Hippodrome yet. So just to explain to people, and correct me if I get any of this wrong, but the back of the stage of the Matcham Theatre backs onto what I guess at one point would have been the balcony over the gaming room. Is that right?
Yeah. So what the actual sort of layout of it hasn't changed much since you were performing there. So the back of the auditorium, the back of if you think about it in old terms, when it was a theatre, so the theatre now where Magic Mike lives would have been the stage of the Matcham, the Hippodrome Theatre. So looking up into the restaurant, that was the balcony. The ground floor where the gaming floor is, that would be the stalls. And then underneath, when it was a circus, they had water tanks and all the animals down there. If anyone wants to go on a tour, Simon Thomas, the owner, does an amazing tour and explains all the history. But at the moment, the Magic Mike set up, so the back of the stage backs onto just one level up from the gaming floor. But because there were so many structural changes, there were massive bits of scaffolding across there. So people were sort of smuggling them in at 5 a.m, building it while it was quietish. And then we're having to take them down. I remember a unicorn coming through the gaming floor at 5 a.m. Then we realized that the unicorn wouldn't fit. So the unicorn went back out again. The CCTV during that time must have just been phenomenal. But we got there in the end. But yeah, a 24-hour business, while is a wonderful thing, you can have something delivered at any point. Trying to build during that is not fun.
Yeah, so I bring that up just to maybe give people a visual on when you say it's 24 hours and you're having to. It's not like the venue was out the back somewhere. The back of the venue is the front of the gaming, like it's the middle of the whole thing.
Yeah, so, it couldn't be worse positioned if it tried.
So how did you? So okay, like you've your unicorns come in and out. There's all those sort of logistical things that must have been going on. How did you convince people? And I know it wasn't just you. You mentioned it was a team effort, but how? Yeah. What were the mechanics of basically saying, it's okay. This
I
is going to
think
work and it's going to be worth it.
because we're the buy-in of the owner of the business, by then it was too late. So no one could really say anything. We just had to sort of apologize to everyone as things happened. And, maybe in retrospect, we did downplay how kind of problematic the build would be. But also, I mean, we'd put in shows before, but we knew this was huge. But until you're in the middle of it, I'd never done anything like that. I was like, oh my God, this is absolutely horrendous. They stripped it back to like brick. There was stuff coming in and out, but there was no sort of secret way out the back that you could bring things in. Everything had to sort of strategically go through the gaming floor or off to the side during working hours. So we chose our time wisely, I think. Yeah, there was lots of apologizing and lots of, Simon, can you just email everyone and say that today's going to be really challenging? So yeah, we got through it. And to be honest, the whole venue was really, really supportive of it. And I think everyone was just like, what is going on? Is this actually going to open on time? It looks like a building site. The show's in 2 weeks. And we were all like, yeah, it'll be fine. And mercifully it was.
It sounds like unbelievably challenging. Like venues have refurbs sometimes, and there's always a difficult get in every now and then. But this is it on sort of steroids, isn't it? So
it was.
What do you think it was about opportunity to blow one's own trumpet? What do you think was a maybe an important part of you for being able to deal with all of those moving pieces, especially as you mentioned that, it's not like you've done all of those things before. This was all new.
I think by that point, I mean, I wasn't obviously doing the refurb myself. There was such a huge team by then, but I think one thing I'm probably quite good at is communication, and I had quite a good relationship across the business at that point with everyone. And I don't know, I think people thought I was a bit of a wild card and a loose cannon. So they were a bit nervous, but also quite excited. Like, she's either going to really fuck this up or it's going to be phenomenal. So I think, I guess I just was sort of trying to be the voice of positivity and like, just hold on, guys, it's going to be fine. Thank you for dealing with this today. I know it's not been easy. So just sort of getting people on side and kind of promising that it was going to be worth the upheaval, I think was probably the greatest skill there. But tenacity on that.
You are not the first person to mention the importance of communication, and you also mentioned, having I'm paraphrasing slightly, but like relationships within the organization.
Yeah.
So what's important about communication in a situation like that or in an organization like that?
I think specifically to our organization, because there's so many departments, and we spoke earlier about when I first came in, and there definitely was no sort of cohesion across the departments. I mean, now here and there, but for me in the theatre, people didn't really like us and people didn't really support what was happening up there. And I think a bit of it was a lack of communication and just kind of a lack of understanding or empathy for other people's departments of the business, other people's needs and operating sort of needs, really. So I think trying to understand where someone else is coming from is the most important thing. And, gaming has its huge challenges, even though I don't really understand much about gaming in itself or how roulette works or any of that. I can see if you just spend a minute like looking at that floor, it's huge and there's so many licensing things and they have to get stuff right or we're in trouble with the Gambling Commission. And then hospitality as well, like massive volumes of traffic, especially at the weekends. Like, and there's a lot of pressure on the bartenders and the waiters and the waitresses to deliver quality drinks and service when we're really busy. And what we do, I think, people look at the theatre and they never really quite know how that works and what the business of it is. Could because it's always like, this is a performance. And for most laymen or laywomen, you don't really see behind the scenes or understand the number of people that it takes to put a show on. So I think just being a bit more open about what the process actually looked like from our side has kind of brought people on board a bit more and like been a bit fascinated by how we work and how how big a project it was and continues to be really. So yeah, I think it's just a bit more kind of interdepartmental communication and just trying to be a bit more friendly and a bit kinder and a bit more human about it rather than battling with people because that just never
Doesn't
really
work. Yeah.
works, you know.
So if we were to take a little bit of a step back in time to sort of that period when you first started programming at the Hippodrome, when you first taken over that job, and you maybe Magic Mike's on the horizon at this point or something, but how did you have to communicate with other departments to have those relationships and that network start to build? So maybe without mentioning any names, obviously, as a contrast to perhaps how it might have been before, what was the difference, do you think, that made the difference?
Um, that's a good question. I was looking at the project from a different angle. I realized that unless we had everyone working together, it wasn't gonna work at all. So, there's no point working in silos because especially in a place like that, I think the vision before had been a little bit binary and a little bit sort of, "Oh, there's a theater, then there's gaming, then there's hospitality, and never the 3 shall meet." Whereas, because we're talking about the whole experiential, thing now with entertainment and, any sort of hospitality, I think at the same time, there were a few changes across the business. So I think there was a bit of fresh blood in people who weren't necessarily of a casino background, not that that's a bad thing, but sort of people who were a bit more open to collaboration. So I had some really strong um, other department leads at that point who I just, without them, there wouldn't be any Magic Mike or any of the stuff we've done across the business. So some of the hospitality team, the front of house team in the Hippodrome Theatre were just incredible. Like, I don't know where I'd be without them. They just are so phenomenal. And you're sort of creating more of a community across the business, I think, is probably the biggest thing, and trying to make it a bit more sociable. I mean, there's very few nights that if we're there, we're not there till 4 a.m. and everyone's up on the roof having tequilas after the theatre's done. I think that's really important and sort of involving other departments in that and making it a little bit more. I hate the word when people say it's like a family because it's not really like a family, but I think you have to have that sense of community across the business and make everyone feel like they're part of something rather than working against each other.
I'm sure anyone listening to this will appreciate the truth of that and the importance of it. And in terms of maybe just to bring it to sort of very sort of earthy kind of concrete terms, what do you think are important things to do to actually instigate that community within an organization like the Hippodrome, or if we were to broaden it out, which we will in a minute, um, thinking more broadly about entertainment, how do we do that? How do we build that community and that network so that we're not siloed, so we're all working together?
I think a lot of that is about personality, really. And again, like I said, understanding someone else's department, understanding their challenges. Across the years, sometimes we do little projects where someone from, I don't know, the restaurant can go and work on the roulette tables or shadow one of them and, and vice versa. So you do get to see a little bit of someone else's life. And, like maybe someone from the theatre could go and work in CCTV for a day and see what it feels like to be watching thousands of screens and having to deal with, issues on the gaming table or someone not coming in or someone being too drunk to get in the door, all that sort of thing. There's so many different challenges. So I think interdepartmental empathy is what I would say. Um,
Nice.
and, for businesses that don't operate like ours, which are most businesses, I think it is quite old fashioned to sort of try and get to know your neighbors and try and just create. It just feels lovely when people are going out of their way to help each other rather than to say no. And it's very easy to operate on your own and just be like, "Oh, no, they're competition." And one thing that Simon always teaches us is, like, there's no such thing as competition. Everyone doing something successful should try and stick together and should try and support each other, and I think that's a good way to think, and it does sort of change your outlook to what success looks like and what competition is.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that, Gillian. I think just even that sentence on its own, if everybody in live entertainment like fully like just embrace that a bit more, we would the whole what is it, rising tides and all that
Yeah.
lifts all boats. Like we'd all if we all embraced more of that, um, yeah, that would come out. And I can't remember who it was. I I remember having a conversation with like a coaching client like ages ago, and well, sorry, not a coaching client, a potential coaching client, and they were, an Elvis tribute, and they were talking about their competition being, this other Elvis, Steve, who lived around the corner. I'm like, that's not your competition.
Oh,
If you
get him
think
on board.
Steve is your competition, you've got a problem. Netflix is your competition.
Yeah, right?
Right.
Poor
Yeah.
Elvis. Oh,
Yeah. Poor Steve. Anyway,
Steve.
thank you, Jillian. If we just broaden our thinking out now. So from your perspective with the performing you've done and the other, all of your other things with entertainment, and of course now your position at Hippodrome, what would you say are the biggest challenges for us in live entertainment today? And we can keep it in, UK focus. What do you think are the biggest challenges we've got to sort out?
Um, I think, I think finance is a huge challenge at the moment, but that's kind of a given. And that doesn't really change. I mean, things are particularly tough at the moment, but I mean, I think people always see entertainment as maybe a luxury. And I think it should be more accessible. And I think it's our responsibility to try and make, ticket prices accessible, even if it's only a few tickets. I quite like things like Today Ticks do, while they have rush tickets and you can sort of enter the competition, you get a ticket for 20 quid or whatever. I think that's really important. Um, I think what we talked about earlier, sort of working without fear and being a little bit more taking risks and being a bit more what's the word I'm trying to say? Just taking more risks and sort of creating stuff that is unexpected and being a bit wild sometimes is good. Ever changing audiences. I was reading something in The Stage, which is a slight tangent, but I was quite interested in what it was, where they were saying, "Oh, we must stop serving drinks to too many people because ushers are being abused and people are getting really drunk at the shows." And I thought, well, that's very interesting, isn't it? Because these theatres are selling drinks because they have to, and it's part of their makeup. And also, with some of those musicals that are kind of jukebox musicals, that is attracting a different crowd into the theatre, and you shouldn't expect those people to understand what traditional theatre behaviour looks like. You can't really, and also you can't ask them to. If they want to come in and have a few drinks, I think it's up to us to adapt our service around that, not try and stop Sharon from Blackpool and her 16 mates having a few bottles of Prosecco. But you have to manage how we respond to that and how we put a strategy in place to deal with people that maybe are a little bit tipsy. And while I will not tolerate any sort of abuse to staff, there are ways of making that a little bit less fractious, I think, if you get that right. So yeah, I think changing audience, finances, and just keeping it interesting and fun and yeah, making it a bit more magic.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. And what about what I find quite a lot in my work and in these interviews as well is that most of the people I talk to have obviously got like really just brilliant ideas about how to do things, current ideas that fit the current reality. That's why they're successful. But they also regularly have a story about things that people used to tell them that turned out to be absolute nonsense. So what I'm wondering is, what do you think might be some of the myths around programming and creating shows and negotiating shows and live entertainment? What could be some of the big myths that perhaps might be holding us back?
Underestimating your audience is a myth, and underestimating what people see, or being a little bit tunnel vision about what people. I think some producers and some programmers will be quite tunnel vision about this is safe, this is what they want, and especially when it comes to maybe older people, thinking that they will want something that's very safe. And I think that's rubbish. I think encouraging people into something that does feel a bit more naughty or risky or subversive lots of older people are well up for that. Ever be ageist or sexist or anything, any of the ists. I think just offering opportunity would be, or restricting opportunity, I think, is a big myth, and restricting what you think will sell.
And what? Thank you. And what do you think? Because obviously you've done that in at various points in your career, performing and programming wise. So what do you think? Maybe what do we have to do to help people take those? What do people have to think to relax a bit more and to maybe take a bit more of a risk? You know, what's the switch that people have to make in their head so that they will do that?
I think if it's been done before, maybe think outside the box a little bit. Maybe I'd always like, we're always like, well, we always say to ourselves two things. What's the worst that could happen? And we've been in much worse situations than this. And both of those things are always true. So I think, yeah, just sort of just being open to stuff that does feel risky. I know that we talk about our development as humans and through our lives. Like, if something feels uncomfortable, that's probably good. That's probably means it's exciting and you're, covering some ground that you haven't done before. And I think the same could be said of entertainment. Like, let's just try it. What's the worst that can happen? Obviously, don't invest millions of pounds into some random magic show that might not sell, but just there's ways of trying things out without putting yourself or the venue at risk that might just be worth it.
It might be that you've already said it, but what do you think are maybe some things that people get wrong a little bit when they've got their programming hat on? What do you think? And maybe it's stuff, again, harkening back to myths, etc. Maybe it's things that were true in 1975.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think some mistakes are?
I think the mistake that I see all the time is that you're not going out and watching other things that you think
Right.
from your experience. Things are changing every day. If you're not out watching everything, whether it's your genre or not, I think you're not a good programmer. You need to be keeping your ideas fresh. You need to know what's out there, even if you don't like it. Great. It's your responsibility to know what's happening and what's going on in that world.
Yeah. That is fantastic, Jenny. Thank you. And as I'm aware that this could become a little bit sort of London centric, but that's fine because that's where we both are
Where
and
we live.
all the rest of it. Where if you were gonna like go out to check out some new stuff this month, where would you be looking? Where do you think is doing, obviously the Hippodrome, but where else is doing other cool stuff?
I think because we talked earlier about venues closing down, and I think a lot of entertainment, certainly in that kind of cabaret world, has changed into a more immersive experience. So we've seen for a good while now all these brunches popping up with like games and things and themes. And I did one on Saturday that was all cowgirls and and country music, which was really good fun. I think I would be looking at venues that don't normally do entertainment. I'd be looking at new venues. I'd be looking at things that I wouldn't normally go and see myself. I mean, obviously, I've got like a programming R&D budget and responsibility, but I will ask people who have really opposite interests to me to pick something, and I'll just go with them, and I'll buy the tickets. So that sort of opens my mind to stuff that I wouldn't even know was happening, maybe because it's not in my kind of sphere of interesting things. I think it's important to support new work. Also, communities that are maybe underrepresented. So, I was about to say Hackney, but Hackney's now so cool that everything's there. But in the past, like they might see, more some music of Black origin things in Hackney happening that we might not necessarily see in a more mainstream venue. I hope that's changed a bit now, but yeah, just making sure that you're keeping a diverse look on things, because it's not all it's not all mainstream. It has to start from grassroots, I think.
Thinking more broadly about the industry still, what would you like to see happen in the next year, 5 years?
I think for me, one of the most important things is creating opportunity. And I still do that where I can. Obviously, I've got a long running show in the theatre, so I'm not programming in the way that I used to. But I do have opportunity for private events and corporate parties and our little smaller live music spaces to get fresh talent in. And I think I really like to create opportunity for people that might not have been seen otherwise. I think that's important. And that works on a bigger scale as well. Like I would like to see um, across the West End, maybe not just plays and musicals, maybe some more interesting, um, not just immersive, and maybe like new musical things. That's fine, and new plays, but a diversity of genre. I think I'd like to see. I think I'd like to see a bit more diversity at board level of who's creating, who's making decisions. I mean that does tend to still be quite old male, pale and stale. Um, I know that's changing, but I think we need to keep pushing for that change and keep making sure that there's a bit more representation at the higher levels.
Yeah, great. And when we do that, because even if it's slow, when we do that and as it improves, what is that going to change uh, creatively and opportunitively?
Well, I think it just leads to a broader view on what we're watching as society. I think if the same people, even if for myself, I will make decisions based on what I know. If I start to collaborate with people, I'll start making decisions based on a much broader panel. So I think looking ahead, the more variety we have, the more people are buying tickets because there's something there for them. There's something that represents them. They want something that they want to see rather than theatre being quite sort of middle class and white and a bit sort of, oh, well, I'll just go out to see the National tonight. It'd be lovely. While that still has its place, I don't think there's anything wrong with being a bit more broad about live entertainment.
We've talked about so many of the things that you've done so far um, in your career, and I'm also conscious that we've left out quite big chunks in terms of all the performing as well and things. But at this point, what's the thing you're the most proud of in your work so far?
Well, I think it'd have to be Magic Mike. Um, I don't think, I mean, I've done some great shows and things, but I think that for me will be a career defining moment. And I will never forget how terrifying it was, but how well it turned out and the team that did it and brought it together. So I think that will be always probably, maybe not the proudest moment.
Thank you. And if there's someone listening to this or watching this that thinks, as I am, wow, Jillian sounds amazing. How, what she does sounds incredible. How do I do that? What would be one piece of advice that you would give someone who maybe does have some bigger, sort of broader, more interesting ideas and wants to start trying to get them programmed? What do they need to be thinking about?
Well, I think for anyone in the arts, well, something that was said to me at drama school is just get your fingers in as many pies as you can and think about your career as a portfolio, not as I'm just an actor. Also, you've got to create your own work. If you don't create your own work and you're complaining about being out of work, then what's the point? Crack on, create something. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just keep practicing, keep doing the craft. And then I think if you wanted to get into what I'm doing now, that was obviously completely an accident, what happened to me. And whether, I think don't be closed minded about what you think your career is going to look like. If someone asked me what the age old question of where will you be in 5 years, I'm like, I don't fucking know. Let's just see what happens. Hopefully employed. But I think having goals is good and having ambition is great, but you have to be open minded and you might try something that you really enjoy that isn't necessarily in your plan. So just keep open to anything creative, I would say.
Yeah, wonderful. And if there was one question you wish I'd asked or that we agreed I would ask and I've somehow forgotten about it, what would that be?
Oh, I don't know. Um, you haven't asked to see my cat again, so I can pop him back on.
For-
Well, I think we've covered pretty much everything. You haven't asked me about my magic, actually. I have one trick, well, two tricks, that I've had more work out of performance-wise than anything else that I've ever done. Um, so, but I'm not really a magician, but I just happen to have these two tricks. So I get booked for them all the time. even though that's not really my speciality. But that is a whole other story. But if you catch me in a cabaret show, you might just catch my magical banana trick. That is not how it sounds. It's not what it sounds like. But I've got two very funny comedy stage tricks that I work on.
Absolutely amazing. And speaking of people catching you and possibly catching a cabaret act with you in as well, where can people go to learn more about you? Where can people go to learn more about your performances and all the rest of it?
I would probably just follow me on the old Instagram at Dolores Deluxe, DEL_Deluxe. So you will get a lot of my show stuff there. Whether I'm hosting a brunch or working with House of Burlesque, you can catch stuff there. There's also a fair bit of cat content on there, just to warn you. And there's always a bit of Magic Mike here and there. So it's a pretty broad place to get a bit of the Jillian world.
That's absolutely fantastic. Jillian, thank you so much for coming to talk to me.
Very welcome.
Thank you for all of that. It was all brilliant. I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Speak soon.
If you enjoyed this episode, here on the Entertainment Matters podcast, you'll find a mixture of longer form interviews and shorter analysis episodes where I talk about how you can start applying the ideas from the interviews in your own work in live entertainment. And if you'd like to be notified when there's a new episode and stay up to date with the podcast, you can sign up for the Entertainment Matters cue sheet at the link in the description. Thanks for listening, and thanks for whatever you do to make live entertainment happen. What a legend!
Right on cue.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
No standing on this. You can pop your head in, but you're not. Right, that's enough. Yeah. I knew this was going to happen.
This is perfect.
It's not. Right. Down. I'll lock you in the bedroom. That'll be there.
Just in case we hit.
Did you want to see an arsehole? I don't know if that was in the thing.
We've got it, whether I wanted it or not. It's perfect.
Right, that's it.
I just we've got our perfect first clip there for any promo of your cat's bum and then you shouting, "I'll lock you in the bedroom."